The Archivist of Forgotten Things. Chapter 1. The Summons. The dust in the Ministry of Magic's Department of Mysteries had a different quality to it than anywhere else. It wasn't the lazy, sunlit dust of a forgotten attic, but a slow, heavy, almost sentient particulate that seemed to absorb sound, light, and ambition in equal measure. Elara Vance moved through it like a ghost, her black robes whispering against the polished stone floor. She was an unspeakable, though her title felt increasingly grandiose for what she did. She was, in essence, a glorified librarian of the arcane. Her domain was the annex of a temporal anomalies, a sub-basement repository for objects and text that resisted classification, that existed in a state of magical paradox, or that time itself seemed to have forgotten. Elara, at 32, was well-suited to the solitude. She had a sharp, intelligent face with eyes the color of tarnished silver and dark hair perpetually escaping its severe bun. Her magic was quiet, precise, more about unraveling than unleashing. She preferred the company of a confused chronometer or a weeping grimoire to that of most people, which was why the sudden, sharp chime of the interdepartmental memo owl, a sleek, brass mechanical bird, made her jump, nearly dropping the fragile, ever-shifting globe of a possible future she was cataloging. The owl hovered, whirring softly before dropping a single, heavy parchment sealed with the unmistakable wax emblem of the Minister for Magic herself. Elara's heart gave a nervous flutter. Correspondence from the minister did not find its way to the annex. Things were usually meant to flow the other way, with great effort and bureaucratic wrangling. Breaking the seal, her eyes scanned the formal script. To Elara Vance, unspeakable, Department of Mysteries. Your presence is requested at the earliest convenience in the office of the minister. The matter is of the utmost urgency and concerns a unique application of your expertise. Herself, Minister Persephone Thorne. Elara read it twice. Earliest convenience in ministry parlance meant immediately. Utmost urgency meant a crisis. And unique application of your expertise was the most terrifying phrase of all. It meant they had a problem no one else could solve, and they were desperate enough to look for her in the dustiest corner of the building. 30 minutes later, feeling distinctly out of place, Elara stood before the imposing mahogany door of the minister's office. She took a steadying breath and knocked. Enter. Minister Persephone Thorne was a woman who carried her authority not with bluster, but with a profound, unnerving stillness. She was in her late 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and silver-streaked black hair. She sat behind a vast desk, but her attention was fixed on a man who stood by the fireplace. He was tall and lean, dressed not in wizarding robes, but in sturdy, travel-worn dragon-hide boots, in a long coat that bore the faint scars of hostile environments. His hair was a sun-bleached brown, and his face was tanned and lined around the eyes, as if he spent most of his time squinting into distant horizons. He had the look of a man who was never entirely still, a coiled energy about him even in repose. "Ah, Miss Vance, thank you for coming so promptly," Minister Thorne said, her voice calm. "This is Cassian Rex. He is a freelance retrieval expert." Cassian offered a brief, assessing nod. "Unspeakable Vance." "Mr. Rex," Elara replied, her tone carefully neutral. She knew of him by reputation. The Department of Mysteries sometimes used his kind for acquiring particularly dangerous or elusive artifacts from the world's remote corners. He was spoken of in hushed tones, brilliant, ruthless, and notoriously independent. "We have a situation," the minister began, gesturing for Elara to sit. "One that falls squarely, and I fear exclusively, within your particular field of study. Cassian, if you would." Cassian moved to the desk and unrolled a large, ancient-looking vellum map. It wasn't a standard wizarding map. The continents were misshapen, and there were islands that shouldn't exist, seas with no names. In the North Atlantic, west of Scotland, was a small, jagged landmass circled in faint, shimmering ink. "This is Tool," Cassian said, his voice low and gravelly. "Or rather, one of the many places legends have called Tool. A vanishing island. It doesn't appear on any modern chart, magical or muggle. Its existence is tied not to geography, but to temporal magic." Elara leaned forward, her professional curiosity instantly piqued. "A chronospatial anomaly. I've read theories, the Flicker Isle of McGillicuddy, the shifting sands of Serendib, but no confirmed case in over 3 centuries." "Consider this one confirmed," Cassian said. "I've been tracking its emergence patterns for 2 years. It's due to phase back into our temporal stream in 72 hours. It will remain coherent for no more than 48. "Fascinating," Elara breathed. "But why the urgency? The Department of Mysteries has documented ephemeral locations before. We observe, we record, we let them fade." Minister Thorne's expression grew grim. "Because Tool isn't empty. According to the few fragmented records that survive, it was the site of a sanctuary, a fortress of sorts, founded by a group of witches and wizards during the global wizarding wars of the 15th century. They called themselves the custodians of the unwritten. They were archivists, historians, and powerful guardians. They sought to preserve knowledge and artifacts too dangerous, too volatile, to be kept in the mainstream world." A cold dread began to coil in Elara's stomach. "What kind of artifacts?" "The worst kind," Cassian said flatly. "Weapons of mass obliviation. Curses that could unravel bloodlines. And according to one source, a single theoretical construct known as the Loom of Fate." The name hung in the air, heavy and ominous. Elara had seen it referenced only once, in a text so unstable it had dissolved into ash after she read it. A temporal manipulator, a device that doesn't just see possible futures, but can reweave the threads of causality itself. "It's a myth." "We believe it was real," Thorne said softly, "and we have reason to believe that a group calling themselves the Ethelred Syndicate is also aware of Tool's imminent return. Their leader is a wizard named Kalen Morwen. He was an unspeakable once, in your department, I believe, before he was persuaded to leave." Elara felt a jolt of recognition, followed by a surge of ice-cold fear. Kalen Morwen. She remembered him. A brilliant, arrogant man with a fascination for the destructive potential of temporal magic. He had been her senior by a decade, and his theories on proactive history, rewriting the past to prevent future conflicts, had been deemed too dangerous, too close to dark arts. He had resigned in a fury. "Morwen believes the wizarding world is stagnant, weak," Thorne continued. "He thinks the statute of secrecy is a cage. With the loom, he wouldn't just change the future, he would rewrite our entire history, creating a world where wizards rule openly and without challenge. The consequences would be catastrophic. The fabric of reality couldn't withstand it." "So you want me to go to Thule?" Elara said, the words feeling alien in her mouth. "With him," she gestured to Cassian. "Precisely," the minister said. "Cassian's expertise is in navigation and retrieval in hostile environments. Yours is in understanding and securing the kind of temporal artifacts we believe are housed there. You are to locate the central repository, identify the Loom of Fate, and secure it before Morwen and its followers can get to it. Failing that, you are to destroy it." Elara's mind raced. She was an archivist, a researcher. She spent her days in a quiet, climate-controlled room. The idea of a race against time and against a team of dark wizards on a disappearing island was the stuff of her worst nightmares. "Minister, with all due respect, there must be someone else. An Auror team. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement. The temporal instability of the island makes it impossible for large groups, Cassian cut in. The more people who cross the threshold, the faster it destabilizes. 2 is the maximum safe number, according to my calculations. Any more and we risk being thrown into a temporal eddy or aged into dust. Besides, Aurors wouldn't know a Chronos cascade from a common kitchen clock. You would. His tone wasn't insulting, merely factual. He was right. The magic involved was so obscure, so theoretical, that her specific niche knowledge was the only key. Minister Thorne fixed her with a steady gaze. Elara, the entirety of our world, our past, our future, rests on preventing Morwen from acquiring this device. You are the only one who truly understands what it is. Will you do it? Elara looked from the minister's grave face to Cassian's impatient one, then down at the map, at the tiny, treacherous island that held a universe of peril. She thought of her quiet annex, her dusty tomes, the peaceful, predictable paradoxes she curated, and then she thought of Kaelin Morwen, with his cruel intellect and his god complex, holding the power to unmake and remake existence itself. She took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. Tell me everything you know about the island's defenses. Chapter 2. The Crossing. The next 48 hours were a blur of frantic preparation. Elara spent every waking moment in the deepest archives, pulling every scrap of information on Thule, the custodians, and temporal anchoring spells. She cross-referenced Morwen's old research notes, her stomach churning at the cold, elegant logic he used to justify horrific acts of magical intervention. Cassian, meanwhile, was a whirlwind of practical activity. He procured a small, fast sailing cutter, the Sea Sprite, which he had heavily modified with enchantments for stealth, speed, and weatherproofing. He checked and rechecked his gear, a compact tent with undetectable extension charms, self-heating potions, a veritable arsenal of defensive and offensive spell components, and a strange silvery compass that didn't point north, but to sources of powerful temporal distortion. They met at a secluded cove on the westernmost tip of the Hebrides as a gray pre-dawn light began to bleed into the sky. The air was cold and sharp with salt. Ready? Cassian asked, not looking at her, as he made a final adjustment to the sail. He seemed entirely in his element. The restlessness she'd sensed in the minister's office now focused into a lethal, efficient calm. As I'll ever be, Elara replied, her voice tight. She clutched her beaded bag, which contained her own carefully selected kit. Reference books, diagnostic tools, containment crystals, and a dozen different temporal dampeners of her own design. The journey was rough. The sea around the proposed coordinates was notoriously treacherous, and the magical fields emanating from the nascent island made navigation by conventional means impossible. Cassian's silvery compass spun and whirred, and he guided the Sea Sprite with an almost preternatural instinct, his eyes fixed on the shimmering haze ahead. Then, as the sun finally broke the horizon, it appeared. It wasn't so much that it materialized out of nothing, but that the world remembered it was there. One moment, there was only churning, empty ocean. The next, a dark, jagged silhouette pierced the mist, solidifying as if painted onto the canvas of reality by an unseen hand. Thule. It was a stark, formidable place, all sharp black cliffs and stunted, wind-twisted trees. A perpetual, unnatural fog clung to its shores, and the air around it hummed with a deep, subaudible thrum that set Elara's teeth on edge. The temporal resonance, she murmured, pulling out a complex brass device from her bag. Dials spun wildly. It's immense. We'll have to be careful. Prolonged exposure could cause temporal dyslexia, phantom memories, or worse. Worse? Cassian asked, steering them towards a narrow inlet. Your past self could meet your future self and cancel each other out, she said matter-of-factly. It's called a chronological paradox cascade. It's messy, Cassian grunted. Let's avoid that. They landed on a shingle beach of black sand that crunched unnaturally underfoot. The moment Elara stepped onto the island, a wave of dizziness washed over her. The world seemed to flicker at the edges of her vision. For a split second, she saw the beach not as it was, but covered in lush, green grass, with laughing children running across it. Then the vision was gone. You felt it too? Cassian asked, his hand resting on his wand. He looked pale. A temporal echo, Elara said, shaking her head to clear it. The island exists in multiple time states at once. We'll be seeing a lot of that. Don't trust your eyes. Trust your magical core. It's more stable. They moved inland, following the needle of Cassian's compass. The interior of the island was a labyrinth of petrified forest, the trees turned to stone by some ancient cataclysm, their branches clawing at the sickly yellow sky. The silence was profound, broken only by the hum of the island and the crunch of their footsteps. Strange, shimmering patches of air hung in the clearings, temporal eddies where time flowed at a different speed. They had been walking for an hour when Cassian suddenly held up a hand, freezing. He pointed ahead. A figure stood between the stone trees. It was a wizard dressed in robes of a centuries-old fashion, his face frozen in a look of surprise. He wasn't moving. As they approached cautiously, Elara realized why. He was caught in a bubble of hyper-accelerated time. From their perspective, he was moving, but so infinitesimally slowly that it was imperceptible. It would take him 1,000 years to blink. One of the custodians, Cassian whispered, a note of awe in his voice. Or an intruder from a previous incursion, Elara said, her diagnostic device whirring. The time differential is astronomical. There's nothing we can do for him. They gave the frozen wizard a wide berth, the sight a chilling reminder of the island's indiscriminate danger. The compass led them to the base of the largest cliff, where a vast, ornate archway was carved into the rock. It was the entrance to the sanctuary. The massive stone doors, covered in runes that pulsed with a soft, golden light, were sealed shut. Elara approached, her heart pounding. This was her domain. She traced the runes with her fingers, her lips moving silently as she deciphered their meaning. It's a locking mechanism, she said after a moment, but it's not key to a password or a bloodline. It's a riddle, a test of knowledge. The central rune cluster glowed brighter, and a voice, ancient and resonant, echoed not in the air but in their minds. I have no light, but I can blind. I have no voice, but I can be heard. I am sought by the wise and shunned by the fool. I am a river that flows in all directions. What am I? Cassian frowned. A river that flows in all directions? That makes no sense. Elara's mind, however, was already racing, fitting the clues together. No light, but can blind. A paradox. No voice, but can be heard. Sought by the wise. It's knowledge, she said, her voice firm. Or more specifically, truth. Truth can blind you to comfortable lies. It has no voice, but its effects are heard. The wise seek it, fools avoid it. And as for the river, truth is the foundation of all timelines. It flows into the past, present, and future. For a moment, nothing happened. Then with a deep, grinding sound that shook the very ground, the massive stone doors began to swing inward, revealing impenetrable darkness. Well done, Archivist, Cassian said, a hint of genuine respect in his tone. But as they stepped across the threshold, a sudden, violent blast of red light shot from the darkness, missing Elara's head by inches. She stumbled back, her wand leaping to her hand. From the shadows within, 3 figures emerged. They were dressed in dark, practical robes, their faces hard and their wands drawn. And standing at their head was a man Elara had hoped never to see again. Kalen Morwen. He looked older than she remembered, his blonde hair streaked with silver, but his blue eyes held the same cold, fanatical fire. A cruel smile played on his lips. "Elara Vance," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "I should have known Thorn would send the department's little bookworm, and Cassian Rex, the ministry's attack dog. How predictable." "Morwen," Cassian growled, moving to stand protectively in front of Elara. "You're too late. The sanctuary is sealed to you." "Is it?" Morwen chuckled. "Your little riddle solver opened the door quite nicely for us. We've been waiting. The temporal field makes apparition unpredictable. But port keys, keyed to my own magical signature, derived from years of research. They work just fine. We've been here for hours." Elara's blood ran cold. They had walked right into a trap. "You don't understand what you're playing with, Morwen," she said, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and anger. "The loom of fate isn't a tool. It's a catastrophe. You can't control it. Control is a matter of intellect and will, my dear Elara," Morwen replied, his wand held loosely, confidently. "Something you have always lacked. You are content to simply observe the wonders of the universe. I intend to improve them. Now you have a choice. Stand aside and let us pass, or be removed." Cassian didn't wait for a reply. With a flick of his wrist, he conjured a shimmering silver shield, just as one of Morwen's followers unleashed a torrent of purple fire. The spell shattered against the shield, but the force of it drove Cassian back a step. "Get to the repository," Cassian shouted to Elara, his eyes never leaving Morwen. "I'll hold them off." Elara hesitated for a split second, torn between the instinct to fight and the overwhelming mission. Then she turned and ran, plunging deep into the darkness of the sanctuary, the sounds of battle echoing behind her. Chapter 3: The Heart of the Labyrinth. The interior of the sanctuary was not a single chamber, but a vast, multi-level labyrinth carved into the living rock. The air was cold and still, thick with the smell of old stone and ozone. Bioluminescent fungi provided a faint, eerie glow, casting long, dancing shadows. Elara moved as fast as she dared, her wand held aloft for light. The architecture was impossible, defying Euclidean geometry. Staircases spiraled in on themselves, corridors bent at angles that hurt the eyes, and doorways opened into rooms that were clearly several floors above or below. The temporal distortion was even stronger here. She passed a library where books flew from their shelves of their own accord, their pages turning backwards. She saw a dining hall set for a feast, the food still steaming, but the people at the table were transparent, ghostly echoes. Her own device was going haywire. She wasn't just navigating space, but time itself. "Find the center," Cassian had said. "The most powerful artifact will be at the heart." But the heart of this place was a moving target. She followed the pull of the strongest magical signatures, her archivist mind cataloging everything she saw. Storage rooms filled with crystalline orbs that held captured moments of history, an armory containing swords that could cut through memory, a menagerie of creatures that existed in fractional dimensions, their forms shifting and blurring. Finally, after what felt like hours, she found it. The central repository was a vast, circular chamber, domed like a planetarium. But instead of stars, the ceiling swirled with a living tapestry of light, the threads of causality themselves, billions upon billions of shimmering lines representing every choice, every chance, every life. It was breathtakingly, terrifyingly beautiful. In the center of the room, on a simple stone dais, stood the loom of fate. It was both less and more than she had imagined. It wasn't a giant physical loom, but a complex, interwoven structure of pure, solidified light. It resembled a three-dimensional, ever-changing mandala made of silver and gold filaments. At its core pulsed a single brilliant point of white light, the prime nexus, the point from which all threads theoretically originated and could be manipulated. The air around it crackled with potential. The hum of the island concentrated into a single, focused note that vibrated in her bones. She approached slowly, her diagnostic tools overloading. This was it, the source of unimaginable power. The power to rewrite her own tragic past, to bring back her parents, lost to a dragonpox outbreak when she was a child. The power to prevent every war, every act of cruelty. The temptation was a physical ache in her chest. But she knew better. She saw the flaws in the weave, the places where threads were tangled or strained. Morwen was wrong. This wasn't a perfect machine. It was a fragile, chaotic, and deeply unstable construct. Pulling one thread to prevent a single tragedy could unravel entire civilizations from history. She had to destroy it. But how? A simple reducto would be like throwing a pebble at a tidal wave? The release of energy would vaporize her and likely take a chunk of the North Atlantic with it. It needed a precise, magical counteragent, a paradox introduced directly into its core. She began rifling through her bag, pulling out her containment crystals and a set of rune-carved rods designed to create a harmonic dissonance field. If she could set them up around the dais and channel a specific reversal charm through the nexus. Impressive, isn't it? Elara spun around, her wand raised. Kalen Morwen stood in the doorway. He was disheveled, a cut on his cheek bleeding sluggishly, but his eyes were blazing with triumph. He held Cassian's silvery compass in his hand. "Where is Cassian?" Elara demanded, her voice trembling. "The attack dog? He put up a remarkable fight. He's currently trapped in a rather nasty temporal loop, reliving the same 5 seconds of a particularly painful bone-breaking curse. My associates are keeping him occupied." Morwen pocketed the compass and took a step into the room, his gaze fixed on the loom. "It's even more magnificent than I dreamed." "Stay back, Morwen." "Or what, Elara? You'll try to stop me? With what? A carefully footnoted rebuttal?" He smiled condescendingly. "You have always been so small. You see a universe of wonders, and your only impulse is to file it away. I see a broken world, and I have the power to fix it." "You'll break it more," she cried. "Look at it. It's not a tool. It's a living thing, a chaotic system. You can't control it." "The greatest magic requires the greatest will," he said, his voice dropping to a fervent whisper. He began to walk towards the dais, ignoring her completely, his arms outstretched as if to embrace the loom. Elara didn't hesitate. "Stupefy!" A jet of red light shot from her wand. Morwen, without even looking, flicked his wrist and a shimmering disk of temporal energy appeared, swallowing the stunning spell. The spell didn't dissipate, it simply vanished, sent moments into the past or future. "You cannot fight me here, Elara," he said, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. "In this room, I am not just a wizard. I am a god in waiting." He reached the dais and placed his hands on the outer filaments of the loom. The structure flared, the light intensifying. The threads on the ceiling began to writhe and twist. A low groan filled the air, as if reality itself was protesting. Elara watched in horror as Morwen closed his eyes, concentrating. A single golden thread on the ceiling, one of billions, began to glow brighter than the others. She didn't know what it represented, but she could feel the intent. He was testing it. He was going to try to reweave a single small event. The air tightened. The hum became a shriek. The stone beneath her feet trembled. And then everything went wrong. The thread Morwen was manipulating didn't move as he intended. It snagged, pulling a dozen other threads with it. The beautiful, ordered tapestry on the ceiling convulsed into a tangled knot. The loom itself flashed from silver gold to an angry, violent red. A wave of distorted force exploded from the dais, throwing Elara off her feet and slamming Morwen against the far wall. The entire island shuddered. The temporal echoes she had been seeing earlier now became a cacophony of overlapping realities. For a moment, she saw the room filled with custodians, screaming as the walls melted. For another, she saw it as a barren cavern, millions of years in the past. The very fabric of time and space was unraveling. Morwen staggered to his feet, his face a mask of shock and fury. No, it was a simple adjustment, a minor correction. You fool, Elara screamed over the roaring chaos. You've started a cascade failure. The paradox is going to consume the island. The loom was now pulsing erratically, lashing out with bolts of raw temporal energy. A section of the wall to her left aged to dust in an instant. To her right, the same wall reverted to molten lava from which it had been formed. They were going to die. The island was going to tear itself apart, and the resulting temporal shockwave could damage the timeline for 1,000 miles in every direction. As she lay on the floor, despair washing over her, her hand brushed against something in her beaded bag, the containment crystals, and an idea, desperate and insane, sparked in her mind. She couldn't destroy the loom from the outside, but what if she could from the inside? Scrambling to her feet, she ignored Morwen, who was now frantically trying to stabilize the loom with spells that were only making the chaos worse. She grabbed her crystals and rune rods, her hands moving with a speed born of pure terror and determination. She wasn't going to set up a field around the loom. She was going to take the field inside. Arranging the rods in a specific pattern on the floor, she placed the largest containment crystal in the center. She then began chanting, not a spell of destruction, but the most powerful, complex stasis charm she knew, layered with a temporal anchor, a spell designed to lock a single moment in place forever. A perfect, eternal paradox. What are you doing? Morwen yelled. Saving the world from you, she shouted back. She poured every ounce of her magic, her will, her life force into the crystal. It began to glow, absorbing the chaotic energy of the failing moon. The crystal couldn't hold it for long, she knew. It would shatter. But for one perfect frozen moment, it would create a point of absolute stillness. With a final, screamed incantation, she slammed her wand down on the crystal. There was no sound, no explosion, only a sudden, absolute cessation of all movement. The chaotic light of the loom froze in place. The roaring stopped. The trembling ceased. For a single, timeless heartbeat, everything was still. Then the containment crystal, unable to bear the strain, shattered. But it had done its job. The stasis field it created collapsed inwards, not outwards. Instead of exploding, the loom of fate imploded. The magnificent structure of light crumpled in on itself, the threads on the ceiling snapping and retracting, not with a bang, but with a sound like a universe sighing its last breath. The brilliant prime nexus winked out of existence. The only thing left on the dais was a perfect, featureless sphere of obsidian, cool to the touch. The loom was gone, neutralized, turned to inert stone. The violent temporal distortions stopped. The island was still unstable, still humming, but the catastrophic cascade had been averted. Elara collapsed, utterly drained, every muscle trembling. A moment later, a figure stumbled into the chamber. It was Cassian. He was bleeding from a dozen cuts, one arm hanging uselessly at his side, but he was alive. His eyes swept the room, taking in the scene, the featureless sphere, The unconscious form of Morwen slumped against the wall, and Elara lying exhausted on the floor. He moved to her side, kneeling down. "Vance, are you all right?" She could only nod weakly. He looked at the sphere, then back at her, a new, profound respect in his gaze. "You did it. You stopped him. We have to go," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "The island, it's still phasing out. We don't have much time." Cassian helped her to her feet. He then walked over to Morwen, magically binding the unconscious wizard with a few terse flicks of his wand. "What about his followers?" Elara asked. "The temporal backlash when the loom failed? It caught them in its wake," Cassian said grimly. "They're elsewhere. Nowhere. Come on." Supporting each other, the archivist and the retrieval expert, with their prisoner in tow, made their way back through the now quieting labyrinth, leaving the heart of the sanctuary and its greatest secret turned to stone behind them. Chapter 4. The Weight of Memory. The return journey was a blur of pain and exhaustion. The sea sprite seemed to fly across the waves, carried by the dying energy of the vanishing island. By the time the Scottish coastline appeared on the horizon, Tula was already fading back into myth, its temporal signature dissolving into the ocean mist. They were met at the ministry by a team of stern-faced oarers and a visibly relieved Minister Thorne. Morwen was taken into custody, silent and broken, to face a lifetime in Azkaban. Elara and Cassian were immediately swept into the ministry's infirmary, where a team of healers worked to mend Cassian's broken bones and counteract the residual temporal radiation that clung to them both. A week later, clean, healed, and dressed in fresh robes, Elara stood once again in the minister's office. This time, the atmosphere was entirely different. Sunlight streamed through the windows. "The Wizengamot has already begun proceedings against Morwen and the captured members of his syndicate," Minister Thorne said. "Thanks to your memories, which we have extracted and verified in the pensieve, his conviction is a foregone conclusion. You have averted a disaster of incalculable proportions." She turned her gaze to Elara. "You displayed courage, resourcefulness, and a profound understanding of your field that went far beyond anything we could have hoped for, Miss Vance. The ministry is in your debt." Elara shifted uncomfortably. "Thank you, Minister, but the debt is paid. I just want to return to my work." "Of course," Thorne said with a small smile. "Though I suspect your work may have a few more resources allocated to it from now on. The Annex of Temporal Anomalies is being officially recognized as a vital division, and you are to be its head." Elara blinked in surprise. "Head? But I'm not an administrator." "You are the foremost expert in the world on a branch of magic that nearly ended it," the minister replied gently. "The title is a formality. You may run it as you see fit, but know that your country thanks you." As Elara left the office, her head spinning, she found Cassian Rex waiting for her in the corridor. He was leaning against the wall, looking much more himself, though a new scar traced its way along his jawline. "Head Archivist," he said, a faint smile touching his lips. "Has a nice ring to it." "It has a terrifying ring to it," Elara countered. "What about you? Off to retrieve some lost amulet from a dragon's hoard?" "Something like that," he said, pushing off the wall. "But first, I wanted to give you this." He held out his hand. In his palm was a small, smooth black stone, a fragment from the obsidian sphere that was once the Loom of Fate. Elara took it carefully. It was cool and utterly inert, no more magical than a river pebble. But it was a reminder. "A souvenir?" she asked. "A paperweight," he corrected. "To remind you that the quietest people often have the loudest of minds, and that the world is safer with you in your annex." watching over the forgotten things. He gave her a final brief nod. "Until next time, Archivist." He turned and walked away, his long coat swirling behind him, leaving Elara alone in the corridor. She looked down at the black stone in her hand, a tangible piece of the most terrifying, beautiful, and powerful thing she had ever encountered. She then made her way back down, deep into the bowels of the ministry, through the familiar, silent halls, and into the annex of a temporal anomalies. The dust motes danced in the lamplight, just as they always had. The confused chronometer was still ticking erratically in its case. The weeping grimoire had left a new puddle on its stand. It was all exactly as she had left it, and yet nothing was the same. She wasn't the same. She walked to her desk, cleared a space, and placed the black stone fragment carefully on a stack of parchment. It was a paperweight, a memory, a silent sentinel. Then, Elara Vance, head archivist, sat down at her desk, pulled a new blank file towards her, and began to write. The story of Thule was over, but there were always more mysteries, more forgotten things waiting in the dust, and she was their keeper. And for the first time, the silence of the annex felt not like solitude, but like peace. Chapter 5. The Echo in the Stone. The piece Elara found in her annex was, like the temporal anomalies she studied, a fragile and relative state. The black stone paperweight sat on her desk, a stark, dark pupil in the eye of the organized chaos of parchment and books. It was inert, every diagnostic charm and probing spell confirming it was magically null. Yet its presence was a constant, low-grade hum in her perception. A psychic weight that the healers at St. Mungo's couldn't diagnose and no potion could alleviate. It was the silence of the stone that was so loud. It had been the heart of the most volatile magical construct in existence, and now it was nothing. It felt wrong, like a vacuum that nature and magic would inevitably rush to fill. Weeks bled into months. Her promotion to head archivist came with a modest budget increase and a junior assistant, a bright but painfully earnest young witch named Lyra, who jumped at the sound of her own shadow. Elara found herself delegating the more mundane cataloging tasks, her own focus turning inwards, towards the unsolvable puzzle on her desk. She began spending her evenings in the annex, long after Lyra had flew home. She would sit and simply stare at the stone, her fingers resting on its cool, smooth surface, trying to feel some echo of what had been. She reread every text on ontological resonance and magical scar tissue. The loom was gone, but the space it left behind in the magical ecosystem had to have created a ripple, a phantom limb of power. One such late night, the air in the annex grew thick and cold. The flickering lamplight seemed to dim, and the usual soft random clicks and whirs of the anomalous objects fell silent. Elara looked up from a dense treatise on post-cataclysmic thaumaturgical signatures, and her breath caught in her throat. The black stone was glowing, not with light, but with a faint internal shimmer, like heat haze on a summer road. And then a whisper-thin tendril of silver smoke, no thicker than a thread, coiled out from its core. It hung in the air for a moment, undulating, before it darted towards a high shelf in a dark corner of the annex. Elara was on her feet in an instant, her wand drawn, her heart hammering against her ribs. She approached the shelf slowly, her mind racing. The tendril had vanished, but the object it had touched was now vibrating softly. It was a small, tarnished, silver music box, an artifact she had cataloged years ago. Its file was marked Anomaly Number 734, Empathic Resonator, absorbs and replays potent emotional imprints. Handle with extreme caution. The box was now playing a tune, a faint tinkling melody she didn't recognize. But it wasn't music that spilled from it. It was a voice she knew all too well. The foundational flaw in custodian theory is their passivity. To record history is to be complicit in its mistakes. The true purpose of power is not preservation, but correction. It was Kaylin Morwen's voice, crisp and arrogant, but laced with a raw, fervent energy she remembered from his early days in the department, long before his descent into fanaticism. This was a memory, a powerful emotional imprint of his intellectual certainty, stored in the music box and now, somehow, activated by the stone. The thread of silver smoke reappeared, retracting back into the stone, which once again became dark and inert. The music box fell silent. Elara stood frozen, her mind piecing it together. The stone wasn't magical, but it was a perfect conduit. It was like a lightning rod for loose, potent magical energy, specifically the kind of raw, temporal, and emotional residue that the loom had dealt in. The annex was filled with objects that were sponges for such energy. The stone was acting as a catalyst, drawing out these imprints and giving them voice. It wasn't a paperweight, it was a seismograph, measuring the tremors of a catastrophe that was still echoing through the metaphysical world. And Morwen's voice was the first tremor. She spent the rest of the night securing the music box in a lead-lined cabinet, warded with every silencing and containment charm she knew. But the damage was done. The quiet of her annex had been broken. The forgotten things were beginning to speak, and she was the only one listening. Chapter 6. A Fractured Reflection. The next incident occurred 3 days later. Lyra was attempting to inventory a collection of mood mirrors. Anomaly number 812 reflect the viewer's deepest insecurities with unsettling accuracy, when she let out a small, startled cry. "Head archivist, this one. It's not showing me." Elara walked over, her senses on high alert. The mirror in question, an ornate Gothic thing, usually showed a person surrounded by shadowy figures, whispering failures. Now its surface was rippling like water, showing not Lyra's reflection, but a hazy image of a stone courtyard under a bruised purple sky. A figure was dueling 3 others, his movements a blur of desperate, precise magic, Cassian. The image was silent, but Elara could feel the desperation, the burning focus, the sharp sting of a cutting curse grazing his arm. It was a memory, his memory, from the fight on Thule. The stone sitting on her desk 20 feet away had begun its faint shimmering again. "Step away from the mirror, Lyra," Elara said, her voice tight. "Now!" She managed to contain the mirror, but the pattern was clear and terrifying. The stone was not random. It was seeking out specific memories related to the events on Thule. It was piecing together the story of its own destruction from the psychic residue left on those who were there. She had to report this, but to whom? The minister had been clear that the entire Thule affair was to be classified at the highest level. Bringing more attention to it, especially to an unstable artifact that was a direct result of the mission, could see her entire annex sealed off, the object she was sworn to protect destroyed out of fear. She thought of Cassian, of the raw, personal pain she had just seen reflected in the mirror. This was his memory, his private struggle. To expose it to a committee of ministry officials felt like a profound violation. A different idea formed, one born of desperation and a budding sense of responsibility. She needed someone who understood the practical, dirty reality of powerful magic, someone who was already entangled in this. She needed Cassian. Finding him, however, proved difficult. He wasn't listed in any ministry directory. He was a ghost, operating in the spaces between official channels. She finally tracked down a contact through a grizzled old curse breaker in the Department of Mysteries who owed her a favor. The message was passed through a series of secure flue connections and anonymous outposts. A single line. "The stone is awake. The annex remembers. Come. He arrived 2 nights later, appearing out of the shadows of the atrium so suddenly that Elara, who had been waiting for him, let out a gasp. He looked older, the new scar on his jaw a pale line in the dim light. There was a weariness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Rex," she said, leading him quickly back into the sanctum of the annex. "Vance," he replied, his gaze immediately darting around the room, taking in the new containment fields, the extra wards, before finally settling on the black stone. "You said it was awake." She told him everything. The shimmer, the thread of smoke, Morwen's voice from the music box, his own memory in the mood mirror. As she spoke, his expression grew grimmer. "So it's a parasite," he concluded, his voice low, "feeding on the ghosts in your museum." "It's more than that," Elara insisted. "It's not feeding, it's reconstructing. It's pulling together the narrative of what happened from the strongest emotional imprints it can find. It's like a phantom limb, trying to remember the body it was attached to." "And what happens when it finishes its little story?" Cassian asked, his eyes hard. "Does it decide it wants its body back?" The question hung in the air, voicing Elara's deepest fear. "I don't know," she admitted, "but we can't let the ministry dismantle this place. These objects, they're not just dangerous, they're records. If we destroy them, we lose the data. We lose any chance of understanding what's happening." Cassian was silent for a long moment, studying her. He saw the dark circles under her eyes, the nervous energy thrumming through her, the protective way she stood between him and her collection. She wasn't the timid archivist he'd met on a stormy beach anymore. She was a warden guarding a prison of volatile memories. "All right," he said finally. "What's your plan, Archivist?" "We contain the phenomenon. We study it. We use my knowledge of the artifacts and your practical experience to manage the manifestations. We learn what the stone wants, and we find a way to put it to sleep for good. But to do that, I need to know everything. What happened in that courtyard?" The memory the mirror showed was intense. Cassian's jaw tightened. He looked away towards a cabinet of sobbing snuff boxes. "Morwen's people were good. They had me cornered. I used a volatile time dilation charm, slowed them down enough to get the upper hand, but it fractured the local timeline. For a few seconds, I was fighting versions of them from 5 seconds in the past and future. It was messy. It left a mark." He tapped his temple. "In here." Elara understood. The stone was drawn to that memory because it was saturated with the very temporal energy that had once powered the loom. "Then we have a starting point," she said softly. "The memories are the key. We need to map them, see the pattern." And so an unlikely partnership was reforged in the quiet gloom of the annex. Cassian took up a sort of residence in a disused office nearby, his presence a steadying, if taciturn, force. He helped her reinforce the wards, his magic more robust and combat-oriented than her own precise, analytical spells. They began a methodical, dangerous process. Elara would use the stone's periodic activations to guide them to an affected object, and they would record the memory it displayed. It was a harrowing journey through the psychic fallout of Thule. They saw Morwen's fervent obsession through the eyes of a quill that recorded nothing but the user's ambition. Anomaly number 521. They felt the chilling fear of his followers through a helmet designed to absorb battlefield terror. Anomaly number 668. They witnessed over and over the final catastrophic failure of the loom from a dozen different fractured perspectives, each one a shard of a terrifying whole. Through it all, Elara noticed a change in Cassian. The hardened retrieval expert was being forced to relive his most difficult battle, not as a fighter, but as an observer. He saw the pain and confusion on the faces of the wizards he had defeated. He saw the raw, world-breaking hope in Morwen's eyes just before the loom shattered. It was unsettling him, sanding down his edges. One night, after successfully containing a particularly violent memory of the sanctuary's collapse that had manifested in a cracked crystal ball, he turned to her, his expression uncharacteristically open. "It's different," he said, "seeing it like this. From the outside, I always thought of them as fanatics, targets, but they were just people. Wrong, dangerous people, but people. He offered them a perfect world. It's a hard thing to say no to." Elara looked at the now dormant stone. That's what the stone is showing us, the full picture. Not just our truth, but theirs. It's creating a complete record. "A record for who?" Cassian asked, the old suspicion returning. Elara didn't have an answer, but for the first time, she wondered if the stone's purpose was malevolent, or if it was simply, in its own alien way, doing what it had always been meant to do, preserving a truth, no matter how painful or dangerous that truth might be. Chapter 7. The Unquiet Past. The manifestations grew stronger, more frequent. The stone no longer needed to be passive. It seemed to be actively seeking out connections. It began affecting objects outside of their containment fields. A carpet that normally displayed the pattern of its weaver's dreams started showing maps of Toul, its coastlines shifting in real time. A set of wind chimes made from dragonbone, which usually sounded in harmony with seismic activity, now chimed in a rhythm that matched Cassian's heartbeat during his fight. The annex was becoming a theater, and the stone was the director, staging a constant, ghostly reenactment of its own history. The breaking point came on a cold, rainy Tuesday. Lyra had gone home early, unnerved by the increasingly oppressive atmosphere. Elara and Cassian were working in silence, cataloging the latest series of manifestations when the temperature in the annex plummeted. The air grew heavy, and the faint, ever-present hum of the island that had lingered on the edge of hearing since their return swelled into a deafening roar. The black stone levitated from Elara's desk, spinning slowly. Dozens of silver threads erupted from it, lashing out like serpents, connecting to artifacts all over the room. The music box flew open, blaring Morwen's manifesto. The mood mirrors showed a kaleidoscope of fear and pain from the final battle. The dragon bone chimes shook violently. It was a symphony of chaos, a cacophony of remembered trauma. In the center of the room, the threads of light began to weave together, forming a hazy, three-dimensional image. It was the central repository on Thule, but it was fractured, unstable, a composite of all the memories the stone had absorbed. And standing within this phantom construct was a figure. It was Kaelin Morwen. Not the broken man in an Azkaban cell, but the Morwen of the memory. Proud, powerful, and furious. He was a construct of light and stolen memory, a ghost given form by the stone's desperate need to complete its story. "Vance!" Cassian yelled, his wand already in his hand, but he was too late. The phantom Morwen's eyes, burning with cold, borrowed light, fixed on Elara. It raised its hand, and a bolt of raw temporal energy, ripped from the memory of the loom's failure, shot towards her. Elara reacted on instinct, not with a shield, but with a counter-charm she had developed for temporal backlashes. The spells met in a shower of silver sparks, and the force of the impact threw her back against a bookshelf. Books on impossible geometries rained down around her. Cassian didn't hesitate. He advanced, his spells sharp and precise, but they passed through the phantom like smoke. It was not a creature of flesh and blood. It was an idea, a memory given violent agency. "It's not real!" Elara shouted, scrambling to her feet. "It's a manifestation! We have to break the stone's connections!" The phantom Morwen ignored Cassian, its entire focus on Elara. It spoke, its voice a horrifying collage of the memories the stone had harvested, layered and distorted. You limited, small-minded creature. You broke the world to save your precious status quo. The loom was a gift, and you shattered it. It launched another attack, this one not a bolt of energy, but a wave of pure disorientation. Elara's mind was flooded with phantom memories, a childhood she never had, a conversation with Morwen that never occurred, the sensation of her own body aging and de-aging in rapid, nauseating succession. She cried out, clutching her head. Cassian saw her distress and changed tactics. He couldn't hurt the phantom, but he could hurt the stage it was standing on. He began firing precise reducto curses at the artifacts the silver threads were connected to. A mood mirror shattered into 1,000 pieces, its plaintive wail cutting off abruptly. The music box was blasted into molten slag, silencing Morwen's voice. With each connection severed, the phantom Morwen flickered, its form becoming less distinct. It roared in silent frustration, turning its attention to Cassian now. It gestured, and a shelf of volatile potion ingredients behind Cassian exploded, sending shards of glass and colorful, corrosive liquids flying. Cassian dove behind a heavy cabinet, but not before a shard of glass embedded itself in his shoulder. He grunted in pain, but his eyes were determined. The stone, Vance, it's the source. Elara, fighting through the temporal vertigo, saw it. The stone was the nexus. While the phantom was a distraction, the stone itself was pulsing with dangerous energy, the silver threads acting as conduits, draining power from the annex artifacts. It was trying to rebuild something, to re-anchor itself. She had to stop it. But how? Destroying the stone was still too risky. She had to disconnect it, not from the artifacts, but from the power source it was trying to tap into. Her eyes fell on the one object in the room that was connected to the event, but had thus far remained silent. The small, ever-shifting globe of a possible future she had been cataloging the day she received the minister's summons. It was a repository of potential energy, of timelines that never were. The stone in its hunger had missed it, or perhaps it was afraid of it. While Cassian kept the phantom occupied, dodging blasts of memory made real, Elara scrambled towards the globe. She grabbed it, its surface cool and slippery under her fingers, the continents inside shifting from empires to wastelands in the blink of an eye. She turned to the spinning stone and threw the globe. It wasn't an attack, it was an offering, a connection. The globe didn't shatter. As it neared the storm of energy around the stone, one of the silver threads lashed out and connected to it, hungry for its power, and the stone screamed. It was a sound that had no business coming from an object, a high-pitched, tearing shriek of feedback. The globe was a battery of what if and maybe a chaos of unrealized potential. The stone, which was trying to rebuild the singular, definitive past of the loom, couldn't process it. The conflicting narratives, the solidity of memory versus the fluidity of potential, created a catastrophic short circuit. The silver threads snapped back into the stone like over-tightened rubber bands. The phantom Morwen dissolved into a shower of light. The roaring hum ceased so abruptly that the silence that followed was physically jarring. The stone dropped to the floor with a dull thud. It was, once again, dark, cool, and inert. The annex was a wreck. Shattered glass, melted metal, and the faint sobbing echoes of traumatized objects filled the air. Cassian emerged from behind the cabinet, clutching his bleeding shoulder, his face pale with pain and shock. Elara stood panting, her hands trembling. She had done it. She had stopped it. But as she looked at the devastation around her, she knew this was only a reprieve. They had won a battle, but the war was far from over. The stone was a problem that couldn't be contained within these four walls. It needed a permanent solution. And as she helped the wounded Cash into a chair, she realized with a sinking heart that the stone's violent outburst had likely been a beacon. The magical disturbance would be impossible to hide from the ministry censors. Their time of secret research was over. The outside world was about to come crashing in. Chapter 8. The Council of Shadows. The fallout was swift and severe. The Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes arrived within the hour, followed by a team of nervous-looking obliviators, who quickly left, realizing there were no muggles to memory charm, and finally a delegation from the minister's office itself. Elara and a patched-up Cassian stood amidst the wreckage, giving their report to a stony-faced Minister Thorn and a tall, severe-looking witch introduced as Cordelia Vane, the head of the Department of Mysteries. Vane looked around the damaged annex with an expression of profound disapproval, as if Elara had thrown a wild party and trashed the place. This is what comes of entrusting matters of high security to a specialized academic division, Vane said, her voice like ice. You were tasked with containment, Miss Vance, not with conducting unsupervised, reckless experiments. Experiments? Elara shot back, her temper frayed. We were attacked. The stone is an ontological hazard. It acted on its own. We defended ourselves and prevented a catastrophic release of temporal energy. By nearly destroying a classified ministry department, Vane retorted. The risk was clearly too great. The object must be destroyed. You can't, Cassian interjected, his voice rough with pain and fatigue. You don't know what will happen if you try. It could be like trying to destroy a black hole. The implosion could take half of London with it. Minister Thorne, who had been listening silently, finally spoke. Then what do you propose, Miss Vance? It is clear the object cannot remain here, and your current methods are insufficient. Elara took a deep breath. This was the moment. We don't destroy it. We don't contain it. We understand it. And to do that, we need to go to the source. The source is destroyed, Vane said dismissively. The island of Thule is gone. Thule is gone, Elara agreed. But the knowledge isn't. The custodians of the unwritten didn't just hide on Thule. They were a global network. They had other sanctuaries, other repositories. We need to find one. We need to find their records, their research on the loom. They built it, or at least they understood it. They must have had a contingency for its failure. The room fell silent. Cassian was looking at her with a mixture of surprise and dawning respect. It's a historical ghost chase, Vane scoffed, a waste of time and resources. But if she is right, Minister Thorne said slowly, her sharp eyes fixed on Elara, it is our only viable path. The alternative is living with a magical landmine that could detonate at any moment. She turned to Vane. Cordelia, assemble a team, the best curse breakers, arithmancers, and historians you have. Provide Miss Vance with whatever resources she needs. Vane's lips tightened into a thin line, but she nodded. As you wish, Minister. Thorne then looked at Elara and Cassian. You have 1 month. Find me a solution. If you cannot, or if that thing manifests again with greater force, my hand will be forced. I will authorize the unspeakables to use any and all means to neutralize the threat, regardless of the collateral damage. Is that understood? The threat was clear. They were on borrowed time. The following weeks were a whirlwind of frantic research. The team Vane provided was competent but skeptical, treating Elara as an alarmist and Cassian as a hired thug. They worked in a secure, heavily warded laboratory, with the stone locked in a multi-layered containment field that glowed with oppressive power. The atmosphere was tense, a far cry from the collaborative, if dangerous, partnership Elara and Cassian had forged. Elara buried herself in the problem, cross-referencing every mention of the custodians, from the Thule memories with every obscure text in the ministry's archives. It was like assembling a jigsaw puzzle where most of the pieces were missing. She found mentions of a starfall chapter in the Andes, a silent scribe monastery in the Himalayas, but all leads fizzled out into dead ends and folklore. The pressure was immense. The stone, though contained, was not quiet. It would periodically test its prison, sending shudders of distorted magic through the lab that shorted out instruments and gave everyone splitting headaches. Vane watched it all with a cold, "I told you so" expression. It was Cassian, with his outsider's perspective and his experience in tracking the untrackable, who found the break. He noticed a pattern in the geographical references that the academic team had dismissed as poetic license. They weren't referring to physical mountains or rivers, but to ley lines, the invisible streams of magical energy that crisscrossed the planet. "Look," he said, spreading a global ley line map over Elara's cluttered desk late one night. "The Starfall chapter in the Andes. The primary South American ley line, the Serpent's Path, runs directly through the Andes. The Silent Scribe Monastery is here, in the Himalayas, where the Dragon's Vein and the Phoenix Tail lines intersect." Elara's eyes widened as she saw it. They weren't hiding in remote places. They were building on power sources. They were plugging their sanctuaries directly into the planet's magical grid. "Exactly," Cassian said, a spark of excitement in his eyes for the first time in weeks. "And if Thule was a temporal power source, it would have been on a ley line nexus of immense power. But temporal energy is unstable. For a backup, for a place of pure record-keeping, they'd want the opposite. They'd want a place of immense stability." He pointed to a spot on the map, a confluence of several of the world's oldest, most powerful ley lines. It was a place of profound magical stillness, known for its resistance to dark creatures and its neutral, grounding energy. "The Isle of Skye?" Elara whispered. "Not just Skye," Cassian corrected, tracing the lines. "Here, the Kirine. The land itself is a fortress. It's where the world holds its breath. If the custodians had a primary archive, a place meant to survive any catastrophe, it would be there." It was a theory, but it was the best one they had. It felt right in her bones, the same instinct that told her how to neutralize the loom. They took the theory to Minister Thorne, bypassing a furious Cordelia Vane. The minister, seeing the conviction in their eyes and the solidity of the ley line evidence, gave them her conditional approval. They would go to Skye, but they would not go alone. An official ministry team, led by one of Vane's most trusted unspeakables, would accompany them. The message was clear. They were still on probation. They were the experts, but the ministry was in control. As they prepared for the journey, Elara packed her bag with a new set of tools, not for destruction, but for communication. She had a growing, unsettling feeling that they weren't going to a ruin. They were going to a library that was still, in some way, alive, and they would need to prove they were worthy readers, not just another group of thieves like Morwen. The final piece she packed was the Blackstone. It was the key. It was a letter of introduction, the proof of what they had faced, and the reason they sought answers. It was the most dangerous thing she had ever carried, and she was taking it home. Chapter 9. The Silent Scribe. The Kirine on the Isle of Skye was a landscape torn from a dream. Great basalt pillars thrust toward the sky like the fingers of a buried giant, and green slopes folded into hidden valleys and sheer cliffs. The air was clean and cold, and the silence was deep and ancient. The moment Elara set foot on the path, she felt it, a profound grounding magic that seemed to settle the very chaos in her blood. The constant low-grade anxiety she had carried since Thule began to ease. The ministry team, led by a brisk, no-nonsense unspeakable named Alistair Croker, was all business. They set up magical surveying equipment, their wands sweeping the area for hidden enchantments. Ley line convergence is off the charts, one of the technicians reported, but there's no signature of a building, no wards, nothing. Croker frowned. Rex, this had better not be a wild hippogriff chase. The minister's patience is not infinite. Cassian ignored him, his eyes closed, his face turned towards the largest of the basalt formations. It's here. I can feel it. It's not hiding behind wards. It's part of the landscape. Elara understood. She walked away from the bustling ministry team towards a sheer rock face covered in thick moss and creeping thistle. She pulled the black stone from the padded pouch on her belt. It was cool and quiet. She held it in her palm, not trying to force it, but simply allowing it to be in this place of power. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a single gentle pulse of warmth emanated from the stone. It wasn't the violent shimmer of the annex. It was a soft golden glow, like a waking ember. In response, the rock face in front of her began to change. The moss didn't vanish, but it rearranged itself, the patterns on the leaves and lichen shifting to form lines of text in a language so old it predated runes. The stone itself seemed to become less solid, revealing a narrow, dark opening that hadn't been there a second before. Croker and his team stared, their instruments going haywire. It's a perceptual filter, Elara murmured, awestruck. It doesn't stop you from seeing it. It stops you from recognizing it, unless you have the key. The key was the stone, a fragment of their greatest failure, acknowledging its own history, seeking its creators. Cassian came to stand beside her, his wand lit. Ready? She nodded. Together with Croker and a pair of junior unspeakables following cautiously behind, they stepped through the opening. They did not find a dusty tomb or a ruined fortress. They found a cathedral of knowledge. The interior was vast, hewn from the living rock, but it was warm and humming with gentle, latent magic. Light came from glowing crystals embedded in the ceiling, illuminating shelves that stretched up into the darkness. Shelves that were not made of wood, but of seamlessly fused stone. And on these shelves were not books, but thousands upon thousands of smooth, river-worn stones, each one etched with faint, intricate markings. A figure stood in the center of the main chamber. It was a wizard, his robes the color of the stone around him, his long beard white as snow. He was so still he could have been a statue, but his eyes, ancient and kind, were open and watching them. "You have come," he said, his voice like the whisper of turning pages. We felt the disturbance, the severing of the great loom, and we felt its echo return to us. His gaze fell to the stone in Elara's hand. "Who are you?" Croker demanded, his wand held ready. "I am Brother Cadern, the last keeper of this repository." He gestured to the shelves of stones. "These are the memories of the earth, the complete records of the custodians of the unwritten. Each stone holds a lifetime of observation, a history, a truth." Elara stepped forward, her heart pounding with the scholar's reverence. "We mean you no harm. We came because of this." She held out the black stone. It was the heart of the loom. We were forced to destroy it to save our world. But it didn't die. It remembers. And its memories are hurting people. Brother Cadern took the stone from her, his fingers brushing against hers. A shock of pure, calm understanding passed between them. The loom was not a thing to be used, the old keeper said sadly. It was a thing to be witnessed. A map of causality, not a tool to change it. The one you call more when misunderstood. And you, child, in your desperation, did what you had to do. But such a violent unmaking could not pass without consequence. He looked at the stone. This is not a weapon. It is a scar. And like any scar, it holds the memory of the wound. It is trying to heal itself by remembering its wholeness. Can you help us? Elara asked, her voice barely a whisper. Can you stop it? Stop it? Kadiran smiled gently. No, but we can help it finish its story. A story cannot be stopped, only concluded. He looked from Elara to Cassian, to the wary ministry officials. The memory it holds is not just of the loom, it is of you, all of you, your fears, your courage, your choices. It is a story of sacrifice and salvation. It needs to be laid to rest, here, among the other stories. He led them to a bare, flat plinth in the center of the chamber. Place it here. Elara took the stone back and with a deep breath, set it on the plinth. Now, Kadiran said, you must give it your memories, not the stolen, fragmented ones it has been feeding on. Your true, willing memories of that day. The full, honest truth. That is the only thing that will satisfy its purpose and allow it to find peace. He looked at Croker. You as a representative of the governing power that authorized the mission. He looked at the junior unspeakables. You as the new generation who will inherit this secret. Finally, he looked at Cassian and Elara. And you two, who lived at the heart of the storm, you must all give your testimony. One by one, they approached the plinth. Croker, his official demeanor melting away, placed his hand on the stone and shared his memory of the minister's grave orders, the weight of the secret he had helped keep. The junior unspeakables shared their awe and fear. Then it was Cassian's turn. He hesitated, then placed his calloused hand on the stone. Elara saw his knuckles whiten, saw the pain flash across his face as he relived the fight. The desperation. The moment he thought he had failed. He was giving the stone his pain, his burden. Finally, it was Elara's turn. She placed her hand on the stone next to Cassian's. She closed her eyes and let it all flow out of her. The terror of the collapsing sanctuary, the overwhelming temptation of the loom's power, the crushing responsibility of her choice, the sheer, defiant will it took to channel the stasis charm. She showed it her fear, her doubt, and her final, unwavering certainty that it was the right thing to do. The black stone began to glow, not with silver or red, but with a soft, warm, golden light. The light spread, enveloping the plinth, then reaching out to the shelves around them. The etched stones on the shelves began to glow in response, a symphony of gentle light, as if welcoming a long-lost sibling home. The stone on the plinth seemed to soften, its edges blurring. It wasn't dissolving but transforming, merging with the plinth itself. The light focused, etching a new, complex pattern onto the surface of the stone, a pattern that told a complete story, a story of a great power, a great folly, and a great sacrifice. When the light finally faded, the stone was gone. In its place was a new, permanent entry in the archives of the custodians. It was at peace. Brother Kadiran placed a hand on Elara's shoulder. It is done. The story is complete. The echo is silenced. As they left the sanctuary, the entrance sealing itself seamlessly behind them, Elara felt a weight she had carried for months finally lift. The sky outside seemed bluer, the air sweeter. The threat was over. On the journey back to London, Croker was uncharacteristically quiet. Finally, he said to Elara, "Your methods are unorthodox, Vance, but they are effective. The Department of Mysteries could use that kind of thinking." It was the closest he would ever come to an apology or a compliment. Back at the ministry, they gave their final report to Minister Thorne. The official record would state that the anomalous object had been successfully neutralized through secure archival procedures. It was the truth, if not the whole truth. Later, standing in her annex, which was finally being repaired and restored, Elara looked at the empty space on her desk where the stone had been. It wasn't a void anymore. It was just a space. Cassian came to say goodbye. His shoulder was healed and the weary shadows had lifted from his eyes. "So," he said, "back to retrieving cursed idols from angry trolls, I suppose." "Someone has to," Elara replied with a small, genuine smile. He looked at her for a long moment. "If you ever need a retrieval expert, for anything, you know where to find me." "I do," she said. He nodded, turned, and walked away, disappearing into the bustling atrium of the ministry. Elara Vance turned back to her desk. Lyra was carefully placing a newly stabilized chronometer on a shelf. The dust motes danced in the lamplight, the familiar, peaceful silence of forgotten things settling around her once more. She picked up a quill, pulled a fresh piece of parchment towards her, and began to write. The story was over, but the work of remembering, of understanding, of caring for the fragile, dangerous truths of the world was never truly done. And she was now and always its archivist.